I'm Nikki van der Drift, and I'm the Chief Executive here at the International Bomber Command Centre, which was set up to right a wrong, which was that Bomber Command was ignored post-war despite all the bravery that they showed and the impact they had on the war. And it does two things. It commemorates those who lost their lives, but also it tells the story of those who survived and also those who were impacted by their campaigns. We were told we had to close in early 2020. We actually closed a little earlier than the deadline, just because we wanted to protect our visitors, and we have a slightly older demographic in our visitors. I can't tell you the devastation. It was awful. The team were incredibly emotional. And I think the moment for me when it hit the most was going up and seeing those walls without a single poppy on them. And that had been the first time since they'd been built in September 2015. That to me was hugely powerful and, devastating. When we were looking at how to react to the closure and the length of time it was likely to be going on for, there were some key elements that we brought into immediately. And one was the finance. It was drawing in our horns, if you like, closing down anything that we could, renegotiating with banks and with our suppliers, making sure that we were limiting our expenditure. But I think importantly, staff welfare became quite key, that mental and emotional care that was needed to put in, how we would continue to keep communicating with them. And so we introduced quite a lot of different elements that meant that we could keep that communication up without endangering their furlough. Prioritising our staff and their welfare and keeping them on board is hugely important to us. So in the first lockdown, we had all bar 3 on furlough. And there's a limit to what you can do. They can't even volunteer. But they can train, so we put a lot of them through training. But a lot of them live on their own and they're isolated from their families. So we instigated things like a coffee and quiz morning. And that happened every week, and it was voluntary, but everyone attended it. And then we had quiz and drinks on a Friday. I phoned all the staff at least once a week. And if they needed it, there were services for a counsellor available to them. And I think it was just really making them feel that we still cared and that they were still important to us as individuals, but as part of the business. So at the end of the summer, we were able to reopen for a short period, and that brought with it another load of challenges with regard to the team. And remember, our team is staff and volunteers, so that's quite a big coterie to deal with. But what we did was we ran pre-opening sessions where we did COVID training, looking at all our plans, making sure everyone understood what they had to do to make us good to go, which was really important for us. When you work with a lot of volunteers, you've got to expand that training across the board. So we had things like our tour guides. So our tour guides would normally be outside with 25 guests speaking out loud. That was a problem. So we bought all of them headsets with amplifiers on, and they each own their own muffler for the end of their microphone. And, I can't tell you how many we've got through because they lose them. But that meant that they could stand further away. We put smaller groups in place. We did more tours. And that meant that all of those visitors were able to feel safe. And I'm delighted to say that the response from visitors was really positive. They felt safe while they were here, and that was key to us. So November saw lockdown happen again. And for us, there were two reasons it was devastating, not just that we had to shut the building, but of course it came days before our annual Schools Remembrance service and our Service of Remembrance, which are key events for us. And they're really what this centre is about. So how do we keep our staff engaged? What do we do to keep them busy? And so to that end, my 22 members of staff have had 408 training units, which in a actually short space of time is fantastic. They've done brilliantly. It means that when we're ready to open, I've got a really highly skilled team ready to go. The other thing we did was we've got 10 acres of gardens here, so they all got involved in gardening. And actually for them it was really important. It was that social contact. It was being out in the fresh air, it was physical exercise. And I think, emotionally, mentally, socially, those were really key things. They've also got involved in stock counting and cleaning, but very much looking at also including things that will make us sustainable long term. And those things are creating databases and looking at our image banks and making sure that every element of our business is sound. Some of them have found it challenging, and others have taken to it to duck, like a duck to water. And one of the things that's meant I've been able to do is completely reassess all of the team and look at where we can take them in the future in terms of progression and their strengths and weaknesses. And they're an incredible bunch, and they are absolutely passionate about this project, and that goes a long way. Feedback from the staff about everything that we've done has been really, really positive. And I think also that as individuals, they feel that we've taken care of them. I think the lessons that we've learned from certainly the staff angle through all of this, it's a reaffirmation of how great they are. But also, I think it's the value that they place on being thought of as an integral part of the fabric of the business. And I think that's a step change from an understanding that they just come here to work. We recognised that one of the impacts of the pandemic and the long term was that we would lose potentially a large segment of our market, which was international. And so then you start looking at how you can replace that market by engaging with your region better, but also taking advantage of the staycation market and bearing in mind that we won't be alone in targeting that market. So it's working with people like our local destination management organisation, Visit Lincoln, working with other partners in Aviation Heritage Lincolnshire, working more nationally with things like the Explorers Road project, looking at how we can create packages that make staying here in Lincoln and taking advantage of heritage sites like this a much better proposition. So a lot of work's been invested in that. The third strand of that is the event programme, which for us is absolutely key, because we use events as a mechanism to get people here who probably wouldn't have engaged with Bomber Command or heritage, but will come up here for a 1940s weekend, for instance. So I've had part of my team focused really on that purely over this period, so that over the next 24 to 36 months we can lay on more of these events to engage in this staycation and regional market. One of the other areas we looked at was how to extend our accessibility market. So we have various mechanisms all around the site to make it easier and more accessible. But there is a sector of the market that we couldn't help, and they are the severely disabled adults. And so we've converted 2 of our standard toilets into a changing places facility, which now means that anyone of any disability will have, particularly physical disability, will have the benefit of having dignity whilst they're with us. And it's one of only 8 in the area. And it's key actually because the government have introduced that all new public buildings as of last year will now have to have a changing places built. But to be ahead of the game is something that we're quite keen on here. So the offshoot of that is that there's a financial benefit. It's known as the purple pound. The disabled pound is, in terms of tourism, is hugely valuable in the billions. And to be able to offer those facilities is not just the right thing, but for a visitor attraction, it's good business sense to make your facilities open to all. So obviously this whole pandemic experience has had a huge impact on us as a business, as individuals, as a team. But I suppose the strongest lessons that have come out of it, for the positive, are that business can never stop developing. This has forced us, I think, to look at every angle of the business, and importantly has given us the time to do it, because some of these things take an awful lot of time. But I think what I'll take from it is in the future we need to make that time, And I think it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget that you have to look forward, particularly when you're a small team.